Welcome back to the Left Library, the home of simple political theory. Today, we dive deep into dialectical materialism, often referred to as the science of socialism. We'll break down its core principles, such as the unity of opposites and the transformation of quantity into quality, and explain how it serves as a scientific method for understanding change in both nature and society. Stick with us as we uncover how Marxists use this powerful tool not only to interpret the world, but also to change it. Dialectical materialism is not simply a philosophy, but is described by Marxist theorists as a scientific method. What makes it scientific is its systematic approach to understanding change in the natural world and human society. Based on empirical materialism, which begins with the real, observable conditions of life, it uses the dialectical method to reveal how contradictions in those contradictions drive development. Marxists argue that these laws apply universally, both to nature and to society. The dialectical method relies on three core laws that define it as a scientific approach. These laws explain the processes of change and development in the world, allowing us to predict and understand how society, nature, and thought evolve. These core laws that we're about to cover in more detail are number 1, the unity and struggle of opposites, number 2, the transformation of quantity into quality, and number 3, the negation of the negation. Number 1, the unity and struggle of opposites, asserts that all things are made up of opposing forces or contradictions. Change happens through the struggle between these opposites. For example, in capitalist society, the key contradiction is between the working class, the proletariat, and the capitalist class, the bourgeoisie. Their opposing interests, with workers seeking better wages and working conditions, and capitalists seeking to maximize profit, creates a fundamental social conflict. This principle can be seen in the natural world too. In biological evolution, species evolve through the conflict between survival and environmental pressure. Engels used this to explain natural phenomena, arguing that all development occurs because of these contradictions, whether between different social classes or different natural forces. This constant push and pull between opposites generates movement and drives historical and natural processes. It is, in this way, the scientific foundation for explaining both social struggle and natural evolution. 2. The transformation of quantity into quality. This law suggests that quantitative changes, small incremental shifts, eventually lead to a qualitative transformation or a major change in its form. In chemistry, for example, the gradual heating of water eventually results in a phase shift from liquid to gas when it reaches a boiling point. In society, we see this with the accumulation of social grievances. Small acts of resistance, strikes, and protests may at first seem insignificant, but over time they accumulate until they reach a breaking point, a revolution. Marxists argue that historical revolutions are the qualitative leaps that occur after long periods of building contractions. The scientific method is based on the same principle. In natural sciences, we observe gradual changes, like the build-up of tectonic pressure, and from this we predict the likelihood of a volcanic eruption. Similarly, Marxists use dialectical materialism to identify the qualitative build-up of class tensions and predict the potential social upheavals. Law 3, the negation of the negation, explains how development proceeds by overcoming contradictions, leading to new stages of existence. Each stage of development contains within it the seeds of its own negation or destruction. But this negation doesn't lead to total destruction. It leads to progress by building on what came before. Marx illustrated this with his theory of historical materialism. Feudalism was negated by the rise of capitalism, but capitalism itself, with its own contradictions, will eventually be negated by socialism. Socialism, according to Marx, is the synthesis, a new form of society that builds upon but also resolves the contradictions of the previous system. In the natural world, we see this with evolutionary biology. As species adapt to new environments, they negate their previous forms and develop into new species. These new species are not entirely different from their predecessors. They've evolved by negating what no longer works while keeping traits that ensure survival. These three laws discussed make dialectical materialism not just a philosophical tool, but also a predictive science. Just as scientists observe natural phenomena to understand and predict changes, like the movement of the planets or the behavior of atoms, Marxists use the dialectical method to understand the laws governing historical change and social development. This ability to predict is what distinguishes dialectical materialism as a science. For example, Marx predicted that capitalism would produce recurring economic crises due to its internal contradictions. His prediction has been borne out repeatedly, as capitalism has experienced periodic crises of overproduction, financial crashes, and rising inequality, all results of the contradiction between capital and labour. But dialectical materialism is more than just a tool for predicting outcomes. It's a guide to action. Just as natural scientists use their discoveries to create technologies or solve problems, Marxists use the dialectical materialism to change society. The unity of theory and practice, or praxis, is fundamental to its scientific nature. This means that Marxist theory isn't passive. It informs revolutionary action. Lenin, in What is to be Done, showed how the scientific analysis of capitalism's contradictions could guide the working class in overthrowing capitalism. So what makes dialectical materialism a scientific method is its commitment to materialism. In contrast to idealism, the dominant ideology, which claims that human thought or spirit is the primary force behind historical development, materialism posits that material conditions of life, such as the economy, technology, and the natural environment, are what shape human consciousness. As Lenin argued in Materialism and Empirio-Criticism, materialism is scientific because it is rooted in the real world. It begins with the observation and empirical facts, not with abstract ideas. Just as the natural sciences rely on evidence and experimentation, Marxists analyze the real material forces that shape society, forces like economic production, class struggle, and technological change. Dialectical materialism also applies to the natural sciences. Engels, in Dialectics of Nature, argued that these same dialectical laws that apply to social development also apply to nature. This means that the unity and struggle of the opposites, the transformation of quantity into quality, and the negation of the negation govern everything from the evolution of species to the movement of galaxies. By treating nature and society as interconnected, evolving systems governed by the same universal laws, dialectical materialism provides a unified scientific worldview. This worldview allows us to see how human society is part of the natural world and is also shaped by its laws. This makes dialectical materialism not just a science of history, but a science of everything. Dialectical materialism is scientific because it identifies and explains the underlying forces of change in the material world, whether in nature or in society. It provides a framework for predicting how these forces will interact and evolve, giving us the tools not only to understand the world, but also to transform it. We hope this explanation has clarified why and how dialectical materialism is often called the science of socialism. It's rooted in the real world, based on empirical observation, and it follows universal laws that apply to both society and nature. If you would like to explore these ideas further, we recommend reading Karl Marx, Capital Volume 1, Friedrich Engels, The Dialectics of Nature, Joseph Stalin, Dialectical and Historical Materialism, Maurice Cornforth, and Materialism and the Dialectical Method. Thank you for joining us again at the Left Library. Be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into political theory, economics, and socialist outlooks. See you again.